Now we have Pathfinder, a whole bunch of different things. So here are some ads for D&D. Look how vintage. It's so great. Enter our Lord and Savior Yuji Warrior. So Hori-san, by day, was a freelance writer. By night, he was a huge computer gamer. He loved the game Wizardry for its gameplay, but it looks like that. A little busy with the UI there, but you know, to each their own. And he also really loved the game Ultima for its tile-based map accessibility, which looks a lot more like what we're used to here, and especially those of you that have played Dragon Quest before, that's pretty much what the overworld looks like. We'll get to that soon, also. So he loved a good RPG. He also worked for the Weekly Jump magazine, which is still running today, as you know. And there, he made some friends. A very important friend that he made while he was working at the Weekly Jump was Akira Toriyama. So here they are with some other guy. It's from Final Fantasy, I'm just making a joke. I know who that is. Don't come at me. Anyway, so Hori-san and Toriyama-san get to be pretty tight. Now, Hori-san, even though he was a freelance writer, and that's how he met Toriyama-san, he was actually experimenting with games himself on a programming level. So this was his very first game that he ever published before Dragon Quest. It's called the Portopia Serial Murder Case. And it inspired this guy called Hideo Kojima. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him. No. Just a little tidbit there. Wouldn't have any of that without any of Hori-san. So we got the art, we got the writing. What about the music for Dragon Quest? How many of you have ever played a Dragon Quest game before? Oh, kisses, besos. So you know that Dragon Quest music is like iconic, right? It's almost like Pokemon music in that it just feels like Dragon Quest. And the person responsible for that for the last 35 years was Koichi Sugiyama, rest in peace. But Sugiyama-san had a lot of credits to his name, even at this point in history. By this point, he had written music for commercials, for pop stars, for anime, live-action TV shows. He also played video games himself, even at the age that he is, or well, I guess was, rest in peace. So, we've got Hori-san writing, we've got Toriyama-san doing the art, we love him. We've got Sugiyama-san doing the music, and we want to combine the positive aspects from both Ultima and Wizardry. And we got this. Let's see if we can get it to work.
今、新しい伝説が生まれようとしている。
Enemies.
Yes, I love that. So what I want to point out to you there, first of all, not a very long or detailed commercial, but one detail that I do want to point out is that one of the only things that's there is those three people's names. That is how much stake they held in Japan at the time, and even to this day. They were so well known that knowing that they were attached to this was enough to sell it to a whole lot of people back then. So, oh, it wants us to watch it again. No. So we finally get Dragon Quest. In Japan, it released in 1986. Here in the United States, 1989. And you can see, it's, I want to say timeless, but no, I don't know if that's the word. It's charming, right? So this was one of the first games of its kind, like literally ever. Your level cap was 30, so that was fun. You had no bag, so all of your extra stuff that you couldn't fit on your character, so that was maybe 3 to 5 items, you had to store it in a vault in the town. So you had to run back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You had exactly 1 save point in the whole game. 1. And if you didn't have any keys, you couldn't go into any doors. Ever. And I'm not talking about like, you know, oh, it's the special doors where like there's a treasure chest behind it, or no, like you literally couldn't even go to an NPC's house. you know, that classic RPG trope where you go into people's homes and you smash all their stuff and look for all their things. Yeah, exactly. So you couldn't even do that if you didn't have a key, which, I mean, in real life makes a lot of sense. But, you know, so it was good. And, most importantly, we got our slime. That was the appearance of the slime, very first one. So, Dragon Quest I is a hit in Japan. Like I said, the main trio was enough to sell this game to plenty of people. And so, sooner or later, but first, we need to talk about some stuff over here in North America. Let me go back to this. Remember how simple and just, you know, low-key that this is? It just has the names, it's name dropping, you know, it just says Dragon Quest. Here in the United States, here's what ours look like. Our advertisement.
Prepare thyself well, Dragon Warrior. Thy most challenging quest ever awaits. Go with speed and go with patience. Seek out an arsenal, a dragon's scale, a torch, and magic herbs. Use wisdom and cunning to choose thy commands, for the dragon lore is a fierce life. Horrible and treacherous minions all guard the evil one's island path. Are thou ready, young one?
Yes, Your Honor.
And so begins a new epic, Dragon Warrior Nintendo.
So what I want to point out is how much more theatrical that was. They really had to play it up over here. That's gonna come back to bite them. Anyway, so let's go on to our next game, shall we?
戦いのファンファーレとともに冒険の旅が始まる。君の指手に隠された多くの謎、恐ろしいモンスター、悪霊の神々から国を救え。勇者の伝説が再び蘇る。スケールが違うぜ。ドラゴンクエスト2、悪霊の神々。Enemies.
I just love that. I love it so much. So Dragon Quest II drops the following year in Japan, and it is a massive, massive improvement. As you can see here in my little GIF, there are 3 people instead of the one single person that you were in the first game. So you actually had a party, which now, those of you that play JRPGs, which I assume is most of you, by show of hands, let's see. Yeah, exactly, that's like basically everybody. So you know, typically in a JRPG, you have a party of, usually it's around 4. Well, this is where that started. So we had a party now. This is also where we find our first Yggdrasil leaves and our first mention of Yggdrasil in any of the Dragon Quest games. Which, if you've played Dragon Quest, you know that's a really big deal. That's one of their main religious kind of centers. So, back to the marketing thing. Notice the box art here. We got the Japanese box art, and they're very, very, like, chibi style. It's very, like, Toriyama, very charming. And then you have whatever that is. And Ivana, yeah, you know what? Whoever said that, A+. A+ for you.
No, that should be 80s Distill.
Yeah, 80s Distill, that's a good way to put it. So what that reminds me of is kind of how they marketed Mega Man and then Kirby.
Yeah.
Even to this day,
Yeah.
they feel like they need to like edge it up for the West. So things are looking kind of a little weird here. So much so.
Free Dragon Warrior game package. Subscribe to Nintendo Power. A free game pack for $40 plus 12 big issues of Scorching Power tips and Weekend Video Man for just $15. Plus an Explorer's Handbook to help you master the dragons and night stalkers. Fly back now. Supplies are limited. Call 1-800-341-3000 for your free Dragon Warrior game pack and 12 big issues of Nintendo Power. Just $15. Call now.
Every single time I see that, I almost am in denial that that's even real. But yeah, they literally had to give away copies of Dragon Warrior. They had to give it away. People wouldn't buy it here. And that's how a lot of people got Dragon Warrior. As a matter of fact, that's probably the most common one. You can find it at most used game stores for like $8 at this point. So yeah, they literally had to give it away here in the United States. But over in Japan, things were doing much better. And then we got the RPG to end all RPGs, or more appropriately, to begin them.
ついに禁断のドラゴンが解き放たれた。これから最後、日本全土が春までともドラゴンクエスト3新発売。
Now, if you know anything about Dragon Quest, which it seems like a lot of you do, and even if you don't, have you been listening for the last 15 minutes? This is a big deal, Dragon Quest 3. It's a big deal for a lot of reasons. In the franchise, even today in 2022, this is probably the most popular one worldwide. And it introduced a ton of different features. For one, you can pick your gender. Now, granted, it was still just 2 options, but that's the first time that you were allowed to do that in a Dragon Quest game. And you were allowed to make your party members. Like, you weren't stuck with Prince Canoff, which those of you that know, you know, rest in peace, Prince Canoff. But the exasperated sigh should tell you all you need to know. But yeah, you got to actually customize your party members. You got to name them. You got to see what classes they were. In later iterations of this game, you're able to multi-class, which, I mean, that's a big deal, right? In this game, they also introduced one of my favorite little tiny features, which is called TNT, Treasures and Trapdoors. In some localizations, it's called Pachisi. Basically, as you can see in the middle there, it's a board game in the game, where like you fight monsters as you're playing. It's really great, I love it. And you can also play watch monster battles in Dragon Quest 3. That will also come back for us later. So you might have heard, if you hadn't heard about Dragon Quest before this morning, you might have heard about the Dragon Quest law in Japan. So DQ3 was massively successful. It still is to this day. And Japan was already in love with this franchise before this game even came out. So when 3 came out, you can see in these pictures, there were lines across the block. They were hours and hours long. People were getting robbed when they were going home from the store trying to get your copies of TQ3. And so there was this urban legend that in Japan, they made it so that Dragon Quest games could only be released on certain days of the week so that people wouldn't skip work and school and that their economy wouldn't collapse. Yeah, not overdramatic or anything. There is no such law. But people do really love Dragon Quest still over there. And you know, DQ3 is so popular, they're even working on this beautiful, beautiful remake that I cannot wait to play. This is also really nice to show you just how much it has evolved since then. Look how pretty it is! So we unfortunately, A, don't know a release date, and B, don't know if it's coming to the United States. I really hope it does, because that looks so good. But you know what that art style reminded me of? It reminded me of our next game. game features quite an eclectic cast. Features a dancer traveling the world to seek revenge for her father's murder, a merchant whose only goal at the beginning of the game is to be the greatest merchant in the world and to make the family proud, a hero whose hometown was destroyed by mysterious evil forces, for a grand total of 8 characters in all, each with their own motivations and own story, coming together to fight for a common cause. Does anybody know what game I'm talking about? It's Dragon Quest IV! Yeah, right? When I put that together, I was like, whoa! I just knew. So, Dragon Quest IV, oh, so good. If you're a fan of Octopath Traveler and haven't played Dragon Quest IV, go play Dragon Quest IV. It's better, in some ways. So in DQ4, of course, we had a storyline where there were 8 different characters, each having their own story. There they are at the bottom there. Ooh, there we go. Woohoo. They each have their own separate stories that all kind of intertwine until they come together to fight a great evil at the end of the game. This was our first Dragon Quest game where we get our caravan. So you get a cute little horse and buggy type deal, and the 4 party members that you have out will be out walking around it, as you can see in that little image. The rest of them will be in your cart. This is also the first Dragon Quest game where we have a casino, which, if you're a Pokemon fan, you know how bad it hurts not to have that casino anymore. I miss it so much. But in Dragon Quest, they have them even now. It's also the first Dragon Quest that ever had mini medals, and my husband knows how much that kills me. He just kind of rolls his eyes. I love collectibles in games, you guys. It's my biggest downfall, but love it so much. So here's our story so far. You can see we're pretty evenly distributed among the years, right? With them coming out in Japan, obviously, before they come out here in the Western world, in North America. That's about to change. So he's got some unexpected news for Dragon Quest. It's not actually that unexpected if you've been paying attention. So, yeah, remember how I said earlier that they could barely even give the copies away? Well, things got worse. And Enix decided that, the sales in the Western world were going down, so their solution was to just stop localizing it. Just don't do it. That was their solution. And this is where stuff gets really, really, really weird. And if you're a Final Fantasy fan, this is also why their numbers are kind of jacked up here in the United States. But I digress, because now it's time for literally the greatest game ever made in the entire history of man. And if you know, you know.
Dragon Quest すごいドラゴンクエストできました。愛が冒険が人生がドラゴンクエスト5天空の花 Alex.
He seems a little bit more disappointed, I think. He heard how poorly it was doing in the United States, and he's like, oh. But Dragon Quest V, Hand of the Heavenly Bride, comes out. In Japan, it came out in 1992, 2 days before I was born. But you might be thinking, well, what about North America? So let's bring DQ5 down here, okay? So, our pattern right now is that it's like every couple of years afterwards it comes out in North America. So let's see, maybe we'll try like 1996. No, that's not where it goes. Well, wouldn't it really, really stink if it was like 10 years later in 2006? No, it's not where it is either. What about like the end of the timeline? How about 2006? Oh, no. So we're gonna need to make some adjustments. Let's bring out the next timeline. DQ5 didn't come out in North America until 2009! Wow, indeed. So, like I said, things are getting kind of weird. What's not weird is that my wife is up there. This is where Bianca comes from. Love her. But essentially in 5, you are given the choice between, in the original games, 2 people that you could marry, and then that would influence later on in the game. Sort of like a Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley situation. Oh yeah, so good. Bianca's the best choice. Anyway, so in that game, we are introduced to a whole bunch of really significant features, one of which is Old Man Knick-Knack. Bet you can't guess what he's for. He's for collectibles, knickknacks. So, love me some DQ5, love it so much. Oh yeah, Pikachu's here too, kind of in a way. So, in DQ5, the main thing is that, and you can kind of infer this from the cover art, the hero is basically a monster tamer, and so as you're going along, you know, obviously you fight monsters because that's how a JRPG goes, but sometimes the monsters will really, really like you, and they'll decide to follow you and be in your party. Doesn't that sound kind of familiar to you? This was indeed, you know, right before. Because it's the best one, objectively, not that I'm biased. And B, because if you've ever seen the movie on Netflix, Dragon Quest Your Story, that is the plot of DQ5. It's a little bit mixed up, but if you're into Dragon Quest, highly recommend. So then we get another favorite of mine. Oh no!
ドラクエを超えるのはドラクエだけ。ドラゴンクエスト6幻の大地12月9日発売 MX。
He just keeps getting more and more sad. So then Dragon Quest, Dragon Quest 6 comes out in 1995 in Japan, in 2011 here in the United States. And this is a bit of a tonal shift in the Dragon Quest kind of vibe of things. If you're looking at that GIF, they're talking about a river of blood, which ends up happening because a character murders her husband, and then you find her, like, they go up to this cave here, and she's there trying to wash the blood off of her blade. It's almost like a Macbeth situation there, like, ouch, down the spot, right? So, much different from the kind of heartwarming, silly kind of vibes that the other games have had to this point. Don't at me about Dragon Quest V with the child enslavement and all that. Thank you to the one person that got that joke. But in this particular game, we're introduced to another really significant part of the franchise, which is All Trades Abbey. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically a method by which you can multi-class your characters. Now, we did have that a little bit in DQ3, but this took it to a whole other level. You also had, down there at the bottom, that little pink-looking thing, there were almost like these beauty contests, where depending on the stats that you had, you could go in there, sort of like that, like in Pokemon, how they have the Pokemon contests. They had that there too. Unfortunately, it kind of died with DQ6. But, you know. So, 6 ended up doing even worse. And I'm really sad about that because I really liked DQ6. But it even does worse in Japan, which is really shocking because up until now, they are going nuts for this stuff. And there's a couple different reasons for it. The first of which is that Chunsoft, which was doing all of the developing from the first Dragon Quest up through 5, they just kind of went off and did their thing. And then they had Heartbeat Inc., which I couldn't even find a logo for these people, so that's a big old red flag right there. So that's part of the problem. Another part of the problem is that Chrono Trigger came out at the same time. Yeah, same guys, except you also had a Final Fantasy umbrella in there. But, like, they're the same. I've played both of them, they're the same. But here's a big part of my personal theory of what happened with DQ6. I think Horizon was a little bit busy with Chrono Trigger and abandoned his game. Not that I'm biased. So, here's the status of our timeline. Then we get...
今度は新しいよ。7だから7番目だから。何が 3D なんだって。やっべえよ 3D だよ。なんでこの辺メタメタしない。するこの辺だ。ねえ何世界に一つしかないしかもそれ以上言うな。そんでね言うなっつうの。で何すんだよ。あやべえ連れて行くぞ。
数学してください。
ねえ何
ドラゴンクエスト7エデンの戦士たち8月26日発売。人は誰かになる。
So this was our first foray into 3D-ish with Dragon Quest VII. That came out in the United States, or not in the United States, in Japan in 2000. When do you think came out here in North America? What do you think? Maybe like, 2013, 15. Anybody guess 2001? What? So DQ7, I gotta confess, not my favorite one. It's infamous for being super duper long, and the plot's a little bit convoluted, but you do get to literally fight God, so that's pretty cool. It's pretty dope. This is one of the first Dragon Quest games that has party chat, though, in, later iterations. So you can see down here, Maribel, the worst character, is talking about something that's actually happening in the plot at that time. Really, really useful when you put the game down for several months and then are like, wait, what am I doing? Never have I done that before. And then, finally, we get the Square Enix merger. That's actually one of my wedding pictures, and it's especially funny because my husband is a huge Final Fantasy fan. And then, things get really good.
Cursed by an evil spell, calls out for a hero. Join an epic quest in a boundless world to save the king and country. Only you can be the hero. Dragon Quest 8 in stores now. Playable demo Final Fantasy 12.
So Square Enix is still trying to also here's this other thing that you can have. So they're really trying to push this thing, right? But with DQ8 it ends up working. How many of you have ever played DQ8?
It's my very first game.
Oh, see, for a lot of people that is the case. It's their very first Dragon Quest game. It's one of them that was most aggressively marketed here in the United States, which is probably why it was a lot of people's first Dragon Quest game. But you can see, this was our first real true foray into 3D, and it is so good. This was our first DQ game where we had the alchemy pot. And in the alchemy pot, you could make different items, you could make pieces of equipment, you could make, you could upgrade the medicinal herbs that you get, make potions, all that good stuff. You also had skill points for the very first time in the franchise. Just look at them, aren't they so charming? So, we have in 2004 in Japan and 2005 here in the United States, we have Dragon Quest VIII. Super duper good. Love me some 8. And then we had my first Dragon Quest game.
Mom, plaid or stripes?
Honey, just be yourself.
You don't understand. It's Kelsey Weaver.
You know who does understand? Me. In Dragon Quest IX, I can choose from hundreds of outfits. I'm out of monsters in the fur poncho. That's my choice. What's yours?
Hi there.
Hey, great cape.
It's Poncho.
Choose your wardrobe, your weapons, your strategy. The adventure is yours. Dragon Quest IX, Sentinels of the Starry Skies. Rated everyone 10 and up.
So, remember what I was saying about aggressive marketing? There was a lot of really, really, really strange commercials for DQ9. That was only one out of 5 of them that exist. Yeah. Weird flex, Square Enix, but okay. But DQ9, in all seriousness, is so good. They go back to what they did in DQ3, wherein the hero is someone that you entirely customize yourself. You could make it a self-insert, which I totally did back in the day. Used it to write fan fiction. But yeah, you could customize your hero however you want. You could customize your party members however you want. Very similar in vibes to DQ3 in that way. This was also our very first Wi-Fi enabled Dragon Quest game. In DQ9, you were allowed to do co-op mode. So you could, if you had two copies of the game and you had another buddy that had a DS, you could play with them. They also had, in the post-game, they had these treasure maps that you could go and fight like rare monsters. You could fight monsters from other Dragon Quest games. It was just so good. It was a love letter to all the other games, in addition to being a great story by itself. This is also the first one, I almost just forgot. This is also the first Dragon Quest game with DLC. Oh, indeed. So, 2009 in Japan, 2010 here in the United States. So, we've got 9 games so far, right? So, you know, as I said at the beginning, I'm an elementary school teacher, right? So, if you'll entertain me, just join me in counting up the games that we've had so far. If you would. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And what comes after 9, everybody? Oh, if you know, you know. 11 comes after 9. Oh, now you might be saying, Alphabet girl, what you doing? I made that joke because there's no legal way to play DQ10 in the United States as of right now.
What smart segue?
Yeah, right. So, the good news though is that, come on. I'm sorry, friends. I can't read Japanese either. Man, you would think this presenter would get subtitles or something. I want professional. You can see that there's a whole bunch of different kinds of races in this game. That's because DQ10 is actually an MMO, which is probably why we never got it here in the United States. It also is significant to note that this is a trailer for an offline remake. So the hope is that this will be a thing here in the United States. And since the Switch is region free, maybe we could just, you know, not have to worry about it. You know what I'm saying? So yes, those of you that are hurting for DQ10, fingers crossed, fingers and toes crossed, we'll be able to play it soon. Oops. But yeah, Dragon Quest X, that's it, that's the name. It doesn't have any other fancy subtitles like Realms of Revelation, or Seeds of Salvation, or Hand of the Heavenly Bit. It's just Dragon Quest X.
Is that an adult rating?
Is it an adult rating? I don't think it is. But yes, it is online. So that's, you know, people be great. People be great. So hopefully, fingers and toes and eyeballs crossed, but not too long, or your eyes will stay like that. We get that soon. So, DQ10 comes out in 2010 in Japan. Now finally, because we can count, we have
The Tale of the Luminary, a child chosen by mighty Yggdrasil. One sent to save us from disaster. The world of Atria was beset by a being of purest darkness. A being who sought to steal the very source of life itself, the heart of Yggdrasil. The world tree marked out one among her children for greatness. He went forth to do battle with the Dark One. But he did not go alone. A band of heroes accompanied him.
Enemy forces! Here they come!
must defeat him. The fate of our world depends upon it.
So remember when I said that DQ9 was the love letter to all the other Dragon Quest games? I lied.
Yeah.
It's actually 11, Echoes of an Elusive Age. You find out why at the very end of the game, no spoilers. But it is so just, look at that 3D animation compared to what we had earlier in this presentation. Mind-blowing, mind-blowing. There's a really great story that it has. It didn't really offer anything specifically new to the franchise other than the fact that it was an open world and that, you know, you can see there's no random encounters. You can straight up just run over them with your horse. It's great. Love that for us. Hate random encounters. But it's just so great. And then the definitive editions of this game and the Japanese versions of this game have a 2D version, which you saw in the trailer. So it really caters to all different fans of Dragon Quest. There's also an option for, they call it Draconian Quest. So if you really are a sadist and you really, really like to up the difficulty, if we're being nice with words, you can set it so that you can never heal, or that you can never buy anything, or that the townspeople will straight up lie to you. That's my favorite one. It's really so good. It is so good. But yeah, DQ11 was the latest one that we had. Came out here in 2018. However, we do have some stuff in the future. So we have a teaser trailer, we have a name, it's Dragon Quest XII, The Flames of Fate. That is almost all the information we have. We know that Hori-san himself described it as Dragon Quest for adults. Who knows what that actually means? We know that there will be an update to the combat system per Hori-senpai, I almost just said, oh my gosh. Per Hori-san himself. We know that it will be exploring the question, what is the purpose of life? Which for a Dragon Quest game, that's pretty deep. That's pretty deep. We also know that it will be running Unreal Engine 5, so good news for us. The player's choices are to be impactful, so I'm thinking something along the lines of triangle strategy. And it will be the first Dragon Quest game, literally in the entire franchise, to have a simultaneous worldwide release. But beyond that, that's all we know. I'm expecting it to have a big tonal shift. Just judging from that teaser trailer, it seemed very dark and kind of gritty. So a lot of the fan base is kind of torn about it, since up until this point, Dragon Quest, at least here in the West, has been about puns, and you know, there's serious moments there too, in Dragon Quest XI.
Boy,
oh boy. I bet some of you are just dying to play that game. Anyway. But yeah, so there seems to be a big tonal shift going on. So a lot of people are nervous about that. And then there's also the death of Sugiyama-san that a lot of people are concerned about. What's going to happen with the music? Did he record or produce anything before he passed away? We don't know. We don't even know when this will be released, or even like a ballpark estimate of when it will be released. So stay tuned for that, folks. So here we've got our timeline. We have no idea if DQ10 will come here to North America. We have no idea when DQ12 will show up at all. But one thing's for sure, we have definitely 100% come a long way from our beginnings. Just look at that comparison. It blows my mind every single time that I think about it. In the span of 30 years and change, which for some people in this room, that's your entire life. That's your entire lifetime. Just absolutely blows my mind. And this would be the end, but I've got bonus content. So let's talk about some spin-offs, shall we? Yeah, we'll do that later. It's very, very strange. But let's talk about spin-offs. So, one of the most popular ones and one of my personal favorites is Dragon Quest Builders, which was released in 2016. It also has a sequel, which is better, called Dragon Quest Builders 2. And essentially, it has two main pieces to it. You can see, kind of, in that little image there, it's vaguely Minecraft-y. But even though it looks kind of like, you know, oh, this is just Minecraft with some Dragon Quest slapped into it, it's a lot more than that. But similar vibes, you build stuff, hence the name. The other thing that's really, really neat about the Builders series is that they go to Dragon Quest 1 and Dragon Quest 2 respectively, and they retell the story from a different timeline perspective, which is really, really cool, especially if you are already a fan of the series. Even if you're not, though, to be honest with you, Dragon Quest 2, or Dragon Quest Builders 2, one of the best games I've played, I gotta say. I've put a disgusting amount of time into that thing. We also have Dragon Quest Monsters, which came out in 1998. This came from the Dragon Quest V part of that game, where you train monsters, you go along the world with them, you fight with them. Sounds awfully familiar, like Pokemon. Came out after Pokemon, but Pokemon stole the idea. We've got Mystery Dungeon, which, you know, even as a Dragon Quest fan, I was really surprised to find out that this originally came from Dragon Quest. So, the very first Mystery Dungeon game starred our good friend Toneko from Dragon Quest IV, and essentially, he's the merchant. He's going along, and he's finding stuff to sell in his shop. He runs into monsters along the way, and it's like a roguelike kind of game. You don't really hear Mystery Dungeon associated with Dragon Quest anymore, though. The last one that they made was for PS2, and it was starring Yangus from DQ8, but as a young child. Most of where you hear about Mystery Dungeon nowadays is with Pokemon. They also have Final Fantasy ones in there too, but this is a DQ panel, get out of here. But yeah, Pokemon seems to be like the name associated with Mystery Dungeon. And I don't know how many of you have ever played Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, but they are so emotional, so good. And the other good thing about Mystery Dungeon is that we get this beautiful piece of box art from that. I just love that. That's one of my favorite reaction images. We also have Rapid Slime, which is one of the more unique entries in the spin-offs, or just in general. So, I'll just let the story trailer speak for itself, shall I?
Once upon a slime.
I hope you're ready for lots of slime puns.
Rocket and his fellow slimes were living the good life in their peaceful hometown of Boingburg. Rocket spent his days going about his business with his 3 slime friends. Then, one day, the 100-strong population of Boingburg was suddenly slime-napped, leaving Rocket lonely and blue.
Poor guy.
Until he unearthed the legendary Slime tank. It was Payback Slime.
Yeah, but you weren't expecting this to happen. vibe. It is a top-down action-adventure, but also, like, you fight tanks, and you can throw your friends into the tank to shoot them at the other tank. You can also use yourself. It's pretty ridiculous. It's so good. It's so good. Those of you that are DQ fans already, Sack Chief on YouTube has a great review of this game. There's also Dragon Quest Heroes, which if you've ever played Hyrule Warriors or just a Warriors game in general, it's pretty much the same thing. You have, just like with Hyrule Warriors, you have all these people from past games. You can see on the cover of the first Heroes game, there's Kirill from 4, there's Terry from 7. This is really hard to navigate. We've got Jessica from 8, Elena from 4. All sorts of different friends from all sorts of different games. Same thing with the second one. It's not the greatest for story purposes, but it is pretty fun if you're just a fan of the series in general or just really want to kill a lot of one thing. We also have some mobile games. We've got some that are Japan exclusive because of course. We have Dragon Quest of the Stars, which is kind of like a gacha mixed with the turn-based RPG, sort of. It's like a dungeon crawler sort of thing. There's Dragon Quest Tact, which is my personal favorite of them. And essentially it's like Final Fantasy Tactics or another like tactics game, if you've ever played those, where you have not just monsters, but you also can enlist the help of other heroes, which is pretty cool. That's like a newer feature relative to the rest of the game. There's also the one at the bottom, which I am super stoked about. Hasn't come out yet. It's called Dragon Quest Keshi Keshi. And essentially it's one of those like slidey puzzle games where you have to like match 3 of a kind or whatever, like the Bejeweled, whatever it's called. But it's made with erasers. Look how cute they are. And I really hope they become a real thing so that I could buy literally all of them.
You would.
I would, you know I would. We also have Fortune Street, which is essentially like Monopoly or Mario Party, but you can see Mario is also there, so not quite like Mario Party. What's really neat about Fortune Street is that there's that whole crossover thing going on. So you can see in the Wii version, there's the Mario characters mixed with the Dragon Quest characters. In the other one, the PlayStation 2 version, which was the first game of its kind, it was a crossover between Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. So really like a sweet spot there. Fortune Street is also where we get this, with Yoshi invading Taxi. We also have Dragon Quest Swords that came out in 2007, and essentially, this game is a product of its time. It's one of those like railway ones where like your character automatically goes, you slash at things as if the Wiimote is your sword. It's a spin-off title. It's a spin-off title. Reminds me a lot of another spin-off title that I'm really familiar with. I'm not quite sure which one it could be. It's really familiar to me, having something that's like weird, vaguely related, where you use a weapon, you know. And finally, this isn't really a spin-off in terms of gaming, but they do have an anime series. They had one in 1991. They also just did a remake on Crunchyroll. You can even watch it. It's a cute little shonen anime, which you'll see from this OP that I'm about to play. Die on Crunchyroll. If you're into shonen, it's worth a shot. It's a pretty sweet show. It's not directly related to any of the games. It's kind of like its own thing. But it does, of course, feature the same monsters, a similar art style, but not quite exactly the same. Fan-base opinion's kind of a little bit on this one. I feel like most of us like it. I personally enjoy it. But, yeah, we've got an anime. There's also plenty of stuff that I haven't even touched on today. Dragon Quest is such a big deal, and it deserves to be a bigger deal here. Thank you so very much for coming to my panel this forenoon. I guess now it's actually afternoon. But I really hope that everybody in this room has a wonderful con weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and do yourself a favor and play a Dragon Quest game. Thank you very much.